org.
Mary Baker, tell us, what is your definition for religion?
Well, I'm going to give you a short form because the expert should answer that. But for me, myself, I consider it a collection of, or a system of beliefs, practices, rules that people live by, perhaps with sprinkling mythology in there with some of it. But I do make a differentiation between big R religion, which sort of defines the group, the social aspect of people who sort of believe the same way getting together, and basically maybe the small R religion, the faith or belief that a person has. That's very personal. So that I may consider myself a small R religion, religious person, but not necessarily in favor of the big R religion that tends to be the bigger group.
Tell me, Cynthia, what is your definition for the word?
Well, interestingly, my definition is a little bit different than yours. I'd say religion is the system that we use to explain life and give meaning to our own lives, but we've had this discussion in my congregation about then what makes religion different than philosophy. And I've actually said, well, a religion needs the community. That you can have a personal philosophy, but a religion actually requires a community of people to be religion.
To practice it. From the Islamic tradition, the word religion that's translated in the Quran from Arabic, the word is deen. And the word means a way of life, right? With that definition, if you think that religion, regardless of whether you have a large R or a small r, as a way of life, what is it as an object of behavior that causes violence? What do you think? And I guess you can dovetail that into just kind of give us your feeling or your definition of what violence is.
Me first?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and perhaps starting with violence, to me, violence contains somewhat of an emotional issue. You know, do I practice violence when my son and I do horseplay? No, because we love each other. We're not trying to hurt each other. If I'm defending myself against somebody who is trying to hurt me, is it violent? Maybe not. If I know that person is just right now crazy out of their mind with anger and will feel bad about it later, I may just be trying to contain them. So somewhere along there's a level that we get up to, is it violent to shoot somebody before they hit you? Yes, obviously. How that ties into religion, I might say that my avoidance of violence probably comes from my very religious belief that I don't necessarily have any more right than anybody else does to be on this earth. I don't have any less either. And so I'm trying to be very careful about how I practice that.
You're looking for a balance.
Definitely a balance.
Yeah.
But that's my religion. If I'm a member of a religion that feels that that is not the case, that there are some people, either because of how they were born, or what they believe in, or what they do, have less of a right to be here, I think that opens the door to violence. Yeah.
So what the question for this evening is religion the source of violence? Reverend?
I don't think religion is the source of violence. I think religion can be used to justify violence and has been too often. I actually had a member of my congregation when I served in Charleston, West Virginia, who wrote a whole book called Holy Horrors, chronicling the history of violence used out of religious belief. He suggested just doing away with religion. That's not my own personal take. My thinking is actually kind of more in line with one of our Unitarian Universalist religious educators, who has written a poem, calls it Matters What You Believe. Yes. So, she says, some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved. Other beliefs are bonds in a world community where sincere differences beautify the pattern. So I think figuring out what beliefs can bind us together and what beliefs are actually separating us is an important part of religion.
It's interesting now. Mr. Scott Appleby from Notre Dame, whatever that wonderful expression is. He talks about the ambiguity, the gray area, where religion can be both a source for violence and a source for nonviolence. And we have excellent examples of that. I mean, we've got the dragon of the KKK, and we have Martin Luther King. You know, so there is those examples. What would you say is your understanding for the source of violence? Just kind of, you know, you don't think about Unitarian. You use going around burning crosses in people's yards, but tell me, what is your feeling about that? What is
joke about us burning question marks?
I wanted to put that in. Yeah.
I think so much of it comes out of fear, out of anger, out of frustration. I was telling you before that many, many years ago in my 20s, I had encountered a family where the boyfriend beat the girlfriend beat her mother, the grandmother beat the couple's child, and the child beat the dog. But that everybody was taking out what was happening to them on somebody else. They couldn't turn to the person who was inflicting the violence on them and deal with that. So instead of thinking they couldn't stop the violence, it went on to somebody else. And I think you can say that one family is replicated in a lot of the violence in the world, that first violence comes in and it gets spread out to too many others.
In this example, would you say that religion is the source of it?
Oh, no, I would not say that religion is the source of violence there. I would say that perhaps the inequities of the world are the source of it there.
Interesting. Mary?
Well, listening to your story, it got me thinking about somebody who accepts the violence and then passes it on. When they pass it on, of course, they think whoever they're passing it on to deserves it, but that must, by logic, you'd think that when they're getting beaten, they must think they deserve it to some extent. And, you know, there are some, perhaps not religious traditions, but certainly vocal religious leaders who will say things like that you deserve being punished because you were bad or evil. I read one the other day, some people were objecting to someone trying to get the military to be a little less preachy and proselytizing and recognize that they had a diversity of religions. And even though this group is 93% Christian, the leader was accused, of course, of being the Antichrist. And a nice little lady wrote and said that her entire prayer group, and she prayed daily that he would burn in hell. And, you know, which I think of as a very violent emotion, is praying that somebody's going to burn in hell. But I think she learned that feeling somewhere. I don't think she was born with it.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, many years ago, I used to accompany a family member to a small church that wasn't my faith, but I would go with this person. And in hindsight, I wish I would have stopped going the Sunday that I went, and the sermon was all about how children needed to have corporal punishment. Spoil the rod, spare the child. It's basically the sermon for the day. And I went after that, and when I did stop going was after the sermon where it was all about, we all need to pray for there to be a major war in the Middle East between the Jews and the Muslims so they kill each other and the Christians can reign.
Boy, they had it all figured out, didn't they?
We have some stories like that in our own community, in the Islamic tradition. You know, usually what happens is in our community, even when people are trying to say disparaging things about Islam and want to condemn the Muslims for following Islam, and the people who are in the community that feels that they have some sort of divine right to attack the society and people around them for some strange reason. They will always point to the same verse in the Quran, and I will share this with you because I find it over the years rather interesting. One of which is the first line, the first verse is, "Fight in the cause of Allah," right? So people basically stops there, and then the criticizers of Islam say, "See there, I told you that that they want to fight folks. I mean, they fight for Allah, And then the zealot in the Islamic community will use it also. We have to fight in the cause of Allah, So we have some loggerheads. Unfortunately, they don't read the rest of the verse, and it says actually, "Fight in the name of Allah those who fight you." They never get to that part though. And they go on. This text goes on about three other stanzas. I'd like to read it for you. Fight those who fight you, but do not transgress limits. Do not transgress limits, for God loves not transgressors. And slay them wherever you catch them, and turn them out where they turn you out. For turmoil and oppression are worse than slaughter. But fight them not in the sacred mosque unless they first fight you there. But if you fight them, you should slay them. Such is the reward of those who oppress faith. But if you cease, Allah will forgive you most mercifully. And fight them until there is no turmoil and oppression. There prevail justice and faith in Allah. But if they cease, there should be no hostility. Now that's pretty long, and it's pretty interesting how it is that every time there is a prescription for fighting, there should also be there is a prescription for restraint. And I think that is a very important part, but you can see how someone can take portions of that verse and declare it a jihad. And this becomes very problematic when people do not take the time to really objectively evaluate things. And I think that's what we're talking about really, is how do you objectively evaluate things to where there is a benefit for everyone who's living in society.
Well, just as jihad doesn't necessarily mean a violent struggle.
Yes.
My daughter educated me on this one. Growing up in Egypt, at one point she decided she needed to tell people what jihad meant. When listening to your passage, I was thinking fight does not necessarily mean a violent struggle.
Right.
I mean, one can fight oppression without bashing skulls. I mean, it sounds like you're given leeway to do what you need to, especially if they do it first.
Yes.
But I mean, I realize I'm hearing it from a pacifist point of view, but it really sounded to me like it's saying, well, stand up for yourself, but always leave room for your enemy to be your friend, which is a wise philosophy.
Yes.
Anywhere.
Yes, there is once in the Islamic tradition, there was once a recovery from a conflict, and one of the companions of the Prophet said that this was the most difficult conflict that he's ever experienced as a young person, and the Prophet said that now in the future you will face your even more challenging foe, and the young man said, "We've just defeated our most challenging foe. What is in our future?" He said, "The internal jihad." And I think that that's a wonderful expression because conflict is conflict, and so we have to learn to manage those things, personally and external as well. So tell us about the notion of what makes human beings violent. What is this almost innate quality that people tend to spring to in terms of violence? Go ahead.
Well, innate. I mean, I think you asked me this question earlier, and I said it's kind of the anger and the fear and the frustration.
Yeah.
But I'm answering the question you didn't ask, of course, but I wanted to kind of spring board off of the quote you just had, because when you were asking some of these questions beforehand, as I was thinking about them, the quote I thought of about when is violence justified was, because I said earlier, I'd love to be a pacifist, but I'm not. And the quote I keep coming back to is the one by Frederick Douglass, which you probably know. Yeah. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are those who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle.
It must be a struggle.
Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them, and these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. So, you know, I think, yeah, unfortunately, I would love there to be no tyrants. I'd love there to be no oppression.
Violence, right.
But until there are no tyrants, until there's no oppression, I don't think we're going to get to the point where there is no violence.
Is that an inward pursuit, Mary? That you can oppress yourself?
Oh, oppressing yourself. I was off on a totally different tangent, so let me think about that.
But go the direction you were going.
Well,
this is a scholar's chair, not a prison.
Oh, goody. Well, to bring in the science point of view, we are certainly by nature violent. You know, we come from the kill, be killed, survival of the fittest world. Apologies to anybody who does not fit evolution into their personal belief system. But, you know, we certainly have evidence in looking at different groups of other animals that probably somewhere along the way we moved from, I'm protecting my close family because they're my immediate gene pool, to recognizing that out there is part of the same gene pool, to recognizing that person that we just brought in from the other tribe is an asset to our tribe. And therefore, I'm protecting my gene pool because I'm making my group stronger. But the bottom line is, somewhere deep inside of us, there is still that part of us that says, stranger, kill, right? And we defeat it all the time, and we learn to balance it out. But I think that for a lot of us, the rest of the world is so strange, and we feel like it's out to get us, that we react. That it's easy to react with violence.
It's easy to act with violence. This is the challenge that Professor Tariq Ramadan, who actually talked about this issue from I think a universal point of view, that he says that, you know, struggle is part of the human experience, violence is part of the human experience, and has to be dealt with. His prescription was to educate people to deal with that impulse for violence. And I'm not sure how well we've done in the past, but I think that this is a worthy pursuit. I thought it was very interesting. Professor Scott from Notre Dame, he actually had in here one of the reasons for violence in religion, he said, is an unqualified absolutism that totally commits the individual. And I think there's some validity there when it's this notion of absolutism, that my actions and my thinking is the absolute necessary act to express my faith. And I think that's what happens when we get to extremism on any level, you know, regardless whether it comes from religion or anything else. I think even in science sometimes we tend to be absolute in our notions of things. Of course, thank God for the concept of theory, which keeps scientists sometimes in check. Not always.
No, we're guilty of having, you know, absolute faith, which we shouldn't. We shouldn't. But we get our pet theories or our pet beliefs, and occasionally a scientist is brave enough to bring up something that totally flies in the face of, well, of course, protons are the smallest part in an atom. You can't break up protons. Or, of course, ulcers are caused by extra acid and worry. They're not caused by some stupid bacteria. And literally, we've you know, slapped that person down like, don't do that. You know, you're challenging our belief system here. So we do it too. I'd like to think that we look in the mirror and realize what we're doing. But scientists have definitely been impressed occasionally for daring to go against our belief system.
You mentioned earlier, Cynthia, about atheists also having the same kind of challenges with the notion of absolutism, and you mentioned that to the point that they wanted to just rid the world of theists altogether. And I know Mr. Hawkins will have a lot to say about that. But what are your thoughts?
Well, interestingly, before you had actually asked me to do this, I had chosen a piece for our, a little quote from a Muslim tradition for our opening words this coming Sunday. And excuse me if I don't pronounce the name correctly, but Ibn Atta Allah al-Iskandari.
Perfect.
What has one found who has lost God? And what has one lost who has found God? If you keep asking both of those questions, I think atheist or theist, you can perhaps
come to a place
together.
Yes, I think that's true. I used to tell Race, my good atheist friend, who we used to have dialogue with, that the first decoration, the first pillar of Islam is Ashhadu la ilaha illallah. There is no deity but the one God, right? And he used to be quite challenged by that. What is that all about? But I love that. The explanation that I love in explaining that came from a Jewish rabbi who was talking about a Muslim scholar. This Jewish rabbi was reading, this Muslim scholar. He said that this world of dualistic approach, where it is that you can never define the absolute in any terms, and anytime you think you should say no. That is not it, and you're constantly evolving this concept. And so I think that's the whole meaning of transcendence, and regardless of whether you are scientists looking at a rock and declare it to be something, then you find out 50 years later that there's some new information around this simple object. But this notion of absolutism is really a problem, isn't it, Mary? It's not only in theism, but almost in every system of thought, that you have absolute possession of all truth and all information, which is the problem.
Which, is only true about the Unitarians. Everybody else might be violent, but we outdo everybody in smugness.
Right.
And I say we loosely, but because that's where I identify mostly these days. To follow up a little on the absolutism of atheism, as you know, I worship in the Church of Science Fiction. And the science fiction author Harry Harrison posited that atheists should be the most fervent pacifists, because anybody else, if they believe in a God and an afterlife, can kill someone saying, well, God's going to take care of them, or they're going to be in their heaven or whatever, but it's now out of my hands. Whereas an atheist is saying, no, that's all you have. If I kill you, I've now removed the one thing that you really truly have, and that would be bad. They can't comfort themselves by thinking that everything's going to be okay on the other side. It was an interesting thought. I don't know if it's necessarily true. I think a lot of atheists feel that or perhaps a perception of them is that if there's no God, then there's no right and wrong, and
that's not the case, obviously.
No.
This total pursuit of moral and ethical value is important in the evaluation of what they do, the evaluation of the world. So tell us, based on your own theological tradition, is there ever a condition where violence is a solution to maintain the peace? I think you touched on it, Reverend Snavely.
Well, I think if you're dealing with tyrants and oppression, I think the struggle is defining what is a tyrant and what is oppression. People find different ways to do that. And religion has been used by everybody. I was thinking of the Frederick Douglass quote I used earlier, and I was thinking, in mid-19th, is that right, 19th century America,
right.
Slave revolts were using the Bible,
That's right.
and slave owners were using the Bible to put down slave revolts.
Yes.
So I think people use religion for whatever they feel is right at the moment. And I think most religions are broad enough that we've been able to do that. You can, as you mentioned with your verse, that people use it in varieties of ways without really thinking through the whole thing.
Yes.
I think whatever Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, I think, if you decide what you want to do with it and what we want to prove, you can find
a verse for it. Yeah, this is very true. Mary, what do you think? Your theological position on this?
Well, I think if you use violence to solve a solution, you can't call the end result peace. And I'll use another sort of science analogy. If, a little close to home, someone has cancer, the surgeon cuts it out, they treat it with horrible chemicals, they hit it with radiation. In the end, the person doesn't have the cancer, but you can't call them the same person they were before. They're no longer the same kind of whole. They've had violence done to them. And I think in an area where you've had to go in with the nerve gas and the bullets and the shields and now everything's automated, so it's painless on our side, more or less. I didn't mean to disrespect anybody who's died in a conflict overseas, but truthfully, we are getting to the point where it's almost like push a button and a bunch of people die. But in any case, if you go in and start shooting and killing people, what you end up with might not be oppression anymore. You might have gotten rid of the oppressors, but I wouldn't yet call it peace.
Yes,
well,
yes.
I agree.
Yes. I had the wonderful experience of having Dr. Douglas Johnston here. And instead of the war piece, what he would, instead of insisting on war as being a solution for the problems that we're having in Pakistan and other places around the world, he was offering that the American influence and the American resources could go in and help establish the madrasas, re-educate people. And, but not on the idea that America has all the solutions, but perhaps that you can find these core values within your own tradition, within your own cultural construct. And so we have those some really good things going on where this kind of approach is answering, offering a solution for violence.
But one problem with that is, no, I mean, I think it's wonderful, but anything that works that well can't be fast.
Right, exactly.
And and it certainly can't happen within somebody's 4-year term of office.
Yes.
And so we do start getting down to the expedience of, I've got to fix this now or I'm not going to get reelected.
Or keep people alive. This is very true.
Well, and there is that too. I mean, you don't want to think that you're trying to keep peace, but your people are dying, but
perfect.
They die anyway.
Perfect, Mary. Thank you. You've said the last words. We're going to thank everyone for being here, and this is another Scholar Share. If you want to know more about the Scholar Share, you can go on the YouTube channel. And you can also catch us at Facebook/Khalil Shadid. You can leave us a comment there. And we look forward to seeing you next time. I am Khalil Shadid. Good night.
Hit it, hit it. Amazing.